Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie, Lizak, CMO at BDEX, along with BDEX's founder and CEO, David Finkelstein. What's new, David?
Hey, Jessie, all's good. Team has been busy. We have new product updates on our identity API, and we'll have a new, a new product launch, I guess, that we'll talk about soon. But we're not quite there, so we'll just kind of leave that in the ether for people to be like, "Ooh, I wonder what's coming."
Awesome. Yes, lots of fun stuff at BDEX. Excited to hear about the identity API. It'll be interesting to hear what they're building. But yeah, today we have a really great episode to focus again on data with another awesome guest for our 189th episode. But today on Deconstructing Data, we're thrilled to bring on Connor Folley. He is co-founder and CEO of Alkemi.ai. Welcome to the show, Connor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're glad you were able to join us today, and we'd love to sort of jump into it. But I'd like our listeners and viewers get a chance to know you a little bit first. So if you could share a little bit of information about you, your journey, what led you to become CEO of Alkemi, and what Alkemi is doing today for its clients. That would be a great way for us to all get to know you.
Yeah, happy to, David. So quick background on myself. So previously, I founded and exited a company called Downstream. We were an AI-driven e-commerce platform that was acquired by a company called Jungle Scout in 2021. And post-acquisition, part of my responsibilities was leading our growing data as a service business, selling structured data products to enterprises that were buying it to power really high stakes decision making. It was around that time when LLMs arrived on the scene, and it became clear that this technology could simplify how business people access the information that they need to make better decisions. However, business decisions happen in Slack, Docs, email, and spreadsheets. That's really where the non-technical business user gets work done. And so the data that's needed to make those decisions often lives somewhere else. And so that gap, as I saw it, kind of creates friction, delay, guesswork, and overall reduces the performance of the organization. So I believe that answers should live where the decisions are made, and that's what we're focused on fixing at Alkemi. So at a high level, at Alkemi, we're building the infrastructure that lets both humans and agents quickly integrate and reliably reason over live business data to make better decisions right there where business decisions are made.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, well, that's a great journey. And, being at the center of so much data, right? I mean, everybody is bombarded by volumes of data these days, and everyone's always sort of struggling on what to do with that data. But I think that our first topic sort of jumps into something that's really important, I think, is just being able to take your existing data and actually make it usable for AI. I think that's an important thing to talk about, because a lot of people sort of struggle with, what to do with all the volumes of data that they have, and what's usable and how to use it, and how to implement AI to make it more powerful, right? And so I'd love to hear what you have to share about this, making existing data usable for AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Very relevant topic, and something that many organizations are struggling with. And I think the issue isn't necessarily the amount of data. Most companies, at least internally, they have plenty of data. The problem is the shape of the data and the context around it. So first it's fragmentation. Data lives across Snowflake, Salesforce, HubSpot, product databases, spreadsheets, marketing tools, et cetera. And so AI systems can't reason over all of that if it's scattered. So first off is tying together all that fragmented data, and then of course is the missing context. AI doesn't just need rows and columns; it needs context. Like, what do the metrics mean? How is it calculated? How can I harmonize this across different systems and departments, because oftentimes the product team will have a different definition for the same metric that sales or marketing has. Understanding what tables are connected, which fields matter. Without that context, models just guess, and guessing is not what we want to base our decisions on. And then lastly, which is a big part of our focus, is the access bottleneck. Most data it's technically accessible, but operationally locked behind analysts or dashboards. You look at most BI solutions, it's rare to see a BI solution gain more than 20% penetration across the enterprise. So this is a problem that enterprises have solved for decades, yet we still find that most business users do not have access to the appropriate data at the point of decision. And so access is a major bottleneck, and has been a major bottleneck with data throughout enterprises for decades. And so need to create structured interfaces to that data that provides consistent schemas, metric definitions, permissions, reusable queries, and then of course live connections to those sources and systems, so that we're not AI is not making decisions based on outdated information. And then once all that exists, AI can reliably reason over data and either drive agents towards more intelligent decisions, or guide the business user towards smarter decisions. And that's the way that we think about data infrastructure for reasoning, and not just data storage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the important things you said there is not letting the AI just make the decision for you on what data is important, right? We all know that AI makes hallucinations and makes assumptions, and a lot of times these assumptions are not, they're not goal oriented, right? So if it doesn't understand what your goal is, it doesn't understand what to do with the data, and it makes assumptions about that data. That's sort of always, I found, it's a frequent first mistake that people make is allowing some system to make that assumption for you, instead of setting your goals and defining what data you need to reach those goals first.
Yeah, that's the most critical piece of context that any AI system needs to understand. What is it? What is that goal or objective that the organization is driving towards, and what does success look like? Because it can be different in every organization, and exactly how it is that's defined. So yeah, critical pieces of context for an AI system to be able to function effectively within an organization, add value.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that applies to pretty much anything. Like when you're using AI, you have to give it the context of what you're trying to, the goal you're trying to achieve, or it makes assumptions, and the outcome is not necessarily applicable. And we've seen that across all kinds of AI systems, not just when manipulating data, but when creating content, when creating whatever, whether it be image content or text content, or just asking it questions, without it understanding the full context of why you're asking the question, it makes a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, that's right. And then, in addition, what trade-offs are acceptable to the organization? Otherwise you end up in the classic paperclip problem, where the AI is ruthlessly focusing on seeking some goal at the cost of everything else within the organization, which of course is not ideal.
Yeah, for sure. Jessie, you're on mute. You're talking, but we see you talking. But
sorry. Oh, and it's funny because my mug says you're on mute. It's probably backwards. So I'm known for that. It's like a thing. Yeah, I mean, I was saying, did it sound like all of a sudden the sound went into a tunnel, but I'm not hearing as much anymore? I think for a moment, maybe my internet had an issue, but in terms of making existing data usable, what do you think would be the most actionable advice for any business? I mean, looking to even just like customer data, looking at your customer data, how do you make it more actionable? How do you take it and run automations with it? How do you make sure that it's clean so you can make decisions on it, or at least use it to consider for decisions? I mean, you both are the experts. What's that actionable advice we need?
Yeah, I mean, I think wherever possible, getting as close to the source as you can while still producing clean data. Oftentimes as it's aggregated and collected through multiple sources, it ends up getting corrupted in various ways, or perhaps legacy systems. It may have been transformed in some way for some system that isn't necessarily required for that particular AI system. So trying to get as close to the source as possible. And I think also, making sure that the output is providing value to your people before you are tying that output to some agent to go about tackling tasks autonomously. It's odd, so often we are focused on autonomous agents being able to reason and take action on data, when it would seem, we should ensure that we're able to provide that to, our human employees first. And if we can't accomplish that, then maybe it's a little too far to be thinking that we can rely on autonomous agents to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
What's your
it's
take
always
on
a
that?
risk. And you have to make sure that your processes are functioning in a real world environment with human interaction first, before you try to make an autonomous process out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Humans in the loop, right, Jessie?
That's true. Humans in the loop. Humans make a lot of mistakes, but you still got to keep us in the loop.
Well, I mean, it's also so critical to the organizational change element. When you look at the facts that, 95% of AI pilots never make it into production. It's a staggering statistic. But when you start tearing apart that problem, more often than not, it comes down to that organizational change element, and you find it's trust within the individual teams where you're trying to deploy those agents. And so if you can simply start by putting these outputs in the hands of those teams, so that they can begin using it in their workflows and their decision making, and earn that trust with them first, you're going to have a lot greater success in driving that organizational change, and having broader acceptance of autonomous agents now coming in, and allowing those teams to be able to move to higher order business problems than they previously were.
Yeah, and I'd say the other sort of warning label I'd put on it is the fact that so many people these days are using vibe coding tools to sort of create applications for whether they be for internal or external use. And I think one of the risks there is that there tends to be a lot of security flaws in those applications. And so you need to be very careful about deploying something that you created, as cool as it might be. And you created this thing, vibe coding, and it does everything that you wanted to do. Once you deploy it in a real world environment, you could be putting your data at risk, because there are typically security flaws in those applications, by default, just because they look for the easiest way to code something. Not necessarily the most secure way to code it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Interesting. I wonder how they're going to improve that. That's a tough one. Because things like, I don't know, David, you know way more about this than I do, but like protocols you have to go through for security, like SOC 2, SOC 1, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Could AI, I mean, that's really expensive to go through that. So could AI essentially do something like that for you?
I'd say to an extent, maybe, but a lot of that sort of compliance, SOC 2 compliance, is around security protocols that involve humans, like things like password management. What do you do how do you manage when somebody leaves the company, and how do you how do you trigger that function that this person left the company? Now you need to remove their account, remove their access, and how many systems did they have access to, right? And so sort of putting controls in place for all of those things, a lot of times those are manual sort of documented processes, not necessarily automated processes that fall under SOC 2 compliance. So there's a lot of nuances there.
It's also a matter of monitoring over time. And so by definition, a certain amount of time needs to elapse to document that you did in fact stick to those policies. So, perhaps, in the future, we'll have a way to use AI to be able to document that on a look back to say, well, we were able to capture that they were in fact, compliant in the past, but perhaps that's wishful thinking. But no, I agree with David. So much of it is the human problem, things like clean desk policies, etc. But boy, I would love it if AI could simplify that process and eliminate some of the organizational pain from SOC 2 compliance.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh man, yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we better move into our second topic. Secure self-serve data access for organizations. I guess speaking of privacy is a good way to transition. Could you kick us off on this, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of business leaders, assume there's that trade-off between data security and data access when there doesn't have to be. I think the real issue is that most organizations try to give employees direct database access, which is dangerous. Instead, what you want is more controlled exposure. We also at Alkemi are taking kind of a different approach to this, rather than thinking about data access from a monolithic standpoint, coming kind of tops down through the CIO and allowing for an AI system to have access to every bit throughout the organization. We find that by coming bottoms up, in a lot of ways, you're able to solve it by incrementally accessing data within teams, because any team leader knows what data their team needs access to and should have access to, and so attacking it that way, it just kind of organically emerges with the appropriate granularity, because the marketing team has access to the appropriate HubSpot data and meta advertising data and Google Analytics data, etc. And they kind of build in that security infrastructure organically, bottoms up. So that's at least how we kind of are philosophically thinking about it, that it's an easier problem to bite off going bottoms up rather than coming tops down in a monolithic sense, and a little bit easier to control at the team layer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and the larger the organization, the larger this problem gets, right? Because you sort of end up with this Venn diagram of overlapping circles where this team needs this access to this data and this team needs access to this data, but both teams need access to some of that data, right? And so it can get very complex.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it gets so complicated when you start looking into like ERP systems and HR systems, et cetera. But if your marketing team or your sales team needs, AI to enhance their decision making or drive greater efficiency, then plug in the tools and the data that they need access to. But we don't need to worry about that big ERP system or that HR system. We're just talking about the HubSpot, the advertising system, the Salesforce, what have you. The sales loft systems, rather than having to worry about the entire enterprise in one giant bite.
Yeah, makes sense. Jessie, you're on mute again.
We all need that coffee mug.
Maybe it's because of my coffee mug. Yeah, I should put it away. I was just asking if there's anything more on self-serve data access for organizations that either of you would add, or if anyone in the chat is seeing, there's 10 of you coming and going on YouTube and another 5 or so of you coming and going on LinkedIn. We were up to 30 at one point just on YouTube. So people are coming and going. What do you all think about this? Do you have any thoughts if you're in the chat, or just let us know what you think about any of it or where you're tuning in from? Let us know you're here. But David or Connor, any last thoughts on this topic?
I think it really comes down to respecting the existing permissions and governance within any organization teams. And, any AI system should allow employees to ask questions to the data that they're supposed to have access to, but only within that authorized set of data. Now, that's easier said than done. But I think, it's most easily defined at the team layer.
Yeah, agree.
100%. Well, we did get a couple questions, and I'm not on mute. I just triple checked. How does one establish that controlled exposure threshold?
Controlled exposure threshold.
I think that was asked earlier when we were talking about what data they should have access to. Another couple questions just as you're thinking about that one. Same person. So a bottoms-up approach to exposure, very interesting. What about big data systems and custodianship of that data? So lots of good questions coming in.
Yeah, I think that we talk about, when you talk about custodianship of the data, usually there's sort of this data governance you have to consider, where each employee, each team has access to specific data sets, right? And so you have to make that determination of one, who has access to what data, and then sort of who governs that, who's in charge of that, who's in charge of making that decision. And I think that's, like we said, the bigger the company, the more challenging this becomes, because you have more data, more types of data, more people that you need to manage, who has access to that data. But, it's something that, I'd say 10 years ago, you wouldn't have a conversation about data governance, right? But now it's like, the bigger the company, the more important that role becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the question of custodianship of data is highly relevant with, the foundational models today, because so often we conflate AI purely with training. And so the belief is, for an AI system to be able to competently reason over my data, I need to hand over possession of my data to whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or Google or Microsoft, what have you. And that's nerve-wracking, justifiably so, for many enterprises, especially if they view any of those organizations as competitors. And so that's why at Alkemi, we architecturally made the decision that we're fundamentally a retrieval-based framework, so that we allow for our customers to be able to plug in their data warehouses or data lakes, whether it be BigQuery, Databricks, Snowflake, or their individual systems, HubSpot, Linear, etc. But the foundational models that are reasoning over it are not not touching their data. So custodianship is maintained by the enterprise. So again, get to kind of have their cake and eat it too. Answer questions with their data, but they don't have to worry about handing over their entire data warehouse to one of the big guys and the consequences of what may happen there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
All great. Yeah. Just someone saying, like Connor said, the team must respect the existing permissions set in place. So we still got people listening. Would love to know what else you all are liking about this conversation, because it's for you who's listening in after all. So keep the questions coming, and I'll transition us into the third topic, which is the role of data analysts in the AI era.
Oh boy. I think there's a narrative right now that AI replaces the analyst, but I don't think that's right. I think that's backward. AI actually makes the analyst more important, not less, by allowing them to move to higher order, more strategic work. And I know saying that sounds like kind of lip service in the age of AI. It's what so often is being told to anxious employees. But I think it's fundamentally true as it relates to the analysts. Today analysts spend far too much time serving as kind of human middleware to the business user who can't write a SQL query or doesn't know how to find the BI system or the dashboard where the data lives. Sort of a help desk for those who can't help themselves. And they shouldn't spend their whole day just fielding tickets and answering questions. So that work doesn't scale, it doesn't compound it, and you're not adding a value to the organization. So I see them shifting to more valuable work, working with those AI systems and teaching them how the business works, feeding them critical context, defining the key metrics and business logic. And that work compounds. The impact of that work is exponential versus working one-to-one with the non-technical person who's simply using you as a help desk for questions and answers.
Yeah. What would you say to that, David? We also did get another comment. He's asking about Alkemi in general, how you can collaborate with your teammates on data and if there's reports and all of that. But in terms of the role of data analysts in the AI era, David, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Connor. I think that there's, going back to sort of the human in the loop, like the AI is super helpful. I use it every day to analyze data for us, but ultimately it comes down to, someone needs to make the decision of, what you're looking at, and, what, when you're analyzing that data, how it relates to your goals, right? And so that's, for me, everything is always goal oriented. I'm always thinking about, whether it's a task, a process, or an analysis. I'm always thinking about what is the goal, like what am I trying to achieve? So even when you're looking at that data and you're doing some analysis of it, that AI does an amazing job of sort of building that analysis for you. But ultimately, you need to make a decision on something. And that decision needs to be, somehow related to your goals. And so I think that's where the sort of human comes into play, and making sure that when you're analyzing that data, you're looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, great points. And oftentimes, that goal is producing some artifact for the team, whether it be a report or some analysis that's going to be circulated and discussed throughout the organization. And that's something that we focus heavily on at Alkemi is, providing our customers with a variety of different artifacts and outcomes that they can easily produce with their integrated data, whether it be a sales report or a marketing report or a traffic report, or these workflows that are often so time consuming within an organization, giving them the ability to kind of encode that once and then gain leverage by allowing that to be scheduled and replicated on an ongoing basis. And you can further compound the impact of that by reproducing it in some of these endpoints like Slack, for example, where teams collaborate. And that's been a unique usage pattern that we've seen emerge with our products, is the ability to be able to produce reports and decision artifacts within Slack where teams collaborate, so that analysis is not only just informing one person on the team, but the entire team has exposure to it, and now they can dive more deeply, they can interrogate the data, and the entire team is now benefiting from that analysis and from that access to the data and engaging with it, and therein gaining trust with the underlying systems and driving some of that organizational change that we discussed earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got another good question on this topic. What would you say to someone who believes that AI will eventually wipe out the existence of data analysts?
I don't think so. I think it's about elevation, not elimination. I think analysts do become more important in this world, not less. If data is the raw material from which value is going to be created and decisions are going to be made, their role shifts from being the person who builds the report to being the person who architects that data layer that the entire organization relies on and fuels sharper decisions and more performant organization. I think about it in much the same way that developers have the ability to work with tools like Cursor and bring context directly into their workflow. They no longer go ask someone to write code for them, but now you're able to make them more productive by delivering the answers and the information that they need right there at the point of work. And so in that world, the analysts are the ones who can build that foundation and make the entire team more productive, structuring that semantic layer and defining the business logic. And so, yeah, I think the repetitive stuff goes away. Can you pull this report for me, or can you do me a favor? And the ad hoc queries that eat up 60 to 70% of an analyst's time. That kind of busy work gets replaced by higher leverage work. And so, yeah, I think ultimately it allows them to have a greater impact and be more valuable across the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, agree completely.
I think they like what you said. They quoted it. Their role shifts from beginning the person who builds the report to the person who architects. Very true. Yes, good one. So that brings us to our final topic of tech stack. So this is something we ask all the guests who come on Deconstructing Data, which is, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
Oh boy. We're big users of Versal, Supabase, Linear. These are all products that we use and love. Frankly, I was having a conversation with my CTO this morning about Opus 4.6 and how mind-blowingly powerful that model is. I think we're at a real inflection point today with the models. I was telling him there's this kind of odd dynamic with foundational models where you'd be asking for help with something or asking a question to a model, and you're wondering, is this model smarter than me at this moment on this given task? How much should I trust this output? Because they kind of bring this Dunning-Kruger energy where they're so confident in the answers that they're providing you. And it really feels like with that Opus 4.6 now, you're asking that question less with the output. It's wow, that is definitely a better work product than I feel like I would have produced in isolation, and much more trust in the outcomes there. So we've certainly reached an inflection point, I believe, with the power of these models.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been playing with a few of them that you can download and run them locally too. But even on a decent machine, it's still takes a little too long. So it's a little frustrating compared to running them off of the cloud. So.
Yeah. It seems though that we're becoming more and more conditioned to accept the latency in the system, so long as we can see the details of the planning, and we at least find, I believe, a little bit more value when there's deep reasoning going on and the model's doing some of that critical thinking. So I think that's an interesting dynamic that I feel like is emerging with at least the consumer behavior around models and some of that latency.
Yeah, and you look at how much money these companies are raising. I'm thinking, a lot of that's going to go towards reducing latency.
Yeah, and then of course the energy consumption topic. I mean, I think that one, at least when I'm thinking about what the limit is here. You think about training a model and that consuming the energy of a small city versus the human brain consuming about the energy to light a light bulb. When you think about it through the energy framework, there's clearly so much headroom here that these models have the ability to consume. If you just think about it purely on an energy basis, if we can gain that kind of efficiency, the output that these models seemingly should be able to produce, if they can achieve the same efficiency that biology can.
Yeah.
Interesting way to look at it. Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been a really great episode. Really appreciate all the tools you just shared. I haven't really thought about Opus 4.6, but it's interesting to hear people talk about it for sure. But in closing, Connor, would you like to let listeners know how they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find Alkemi at Alkemi.ai. That's ALKEMI. And you can contact us there. Otherwise, you can reach out through our LinkedIn page. That's a great way to contact us. Or you can email us directly or me directly at Connor@Alkemi.ai, CONNOR. Feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to follow up with you.
Awesome, Connor. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Jessie, it's been a pleasure. Really great chatting with you.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and close us out here. Thank you, everyone. So audience members, we want to invite you to get powered by BDEX. Build authentic connections with your audience and drive unprecedented engagement. So just imagine harnessing the power of AI to craft your audiences that truly resonate with your brand, ensuring that your marketing is hitting the mark every time. We want to bring you closer to those marketing goals, and we're eager to guide you. So just visit bdex.com. You can click on the Talk to an Expert button and get powered by BDEX. Deconstructing Data is the show that makes data make sense. Every Thursday, David Finkelstein and myself, Jessie Lizak, sit down with industry experts to unpack how data really drives marketing. We do this in plain language anyone can understand. If you want real insights, real conversations, and zero jargon, tune into Deconstructing Data live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time.